Don't leave the boy at the dump. K9, officer rescues 7-year-old from cruel stepmother. The wind swept across the Red Mesa landfill like a living thing, dragging dust and plastic through the cold New Mexico night. Temperatures had dropped fast after sunset, and the horizon shimmered with pale starlight and the faint orange glow of a distant refinery. A black Ford Interceptor roared down the cracked service road and screeched to a stop at the gate. Sergeant Mason Reed stepped out, boots crunching gravel. His breath came out white. 12 years on the Sandstone Police K9 unit had taught him to trust instinct over evidence, but tonight something was off. The dispatch call had been vague. Possible child in distress near the South Ridge? No witnesses, no video feed, no name. Just the kind of silence that meant trouble. From the back of the SUV, Atlas leapt out, a 4-year-old German shepherd, black and tan coat streaked with sand, muscles taut beneath the harness marked K9 Search and Rescue. His amber eyes flicked between Mason and the dark horizon. The wind carried the scent of oil, burnt rubber, and something foreign. Perfume. Find him, Mason said quietly. Atlas lowered his head and moved forward, nose sweeping the ground. The beam of Mason's flashlight caught the shimmer of twisted metal, piles of crushed cans, and a torn blue ribbon snagged on a wire fence. The dog stopped, sniffed the fabric, and barked once, sharp, certain. He took off through the debris field, body low, moving like a ghost between mounds of rusted scrap. Mason followed, lungs burning in the thin desert air. The sound reached him before the sight, a weak, high whimper carried by the wind. He swung his light toward it and froze. A small figure was bound to a corroded pipe jutting from the ground, wrists raw and trembling. "Noah," Mason breathed. The boy's dark hair stuck to his forehead, his jacket flapping against the wind. His lips were pale, his eyes half open but aware. "Dad, she left me," he whispered. Mason dropped to his knees, cutting through the knots with his utility knife. He wrapped his son in his jacket, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest. Atlas pressed close, growling low as if guarding them from the dark itself. Then headlights flared across the landfill. A white SUV idled 20 yards away. A tall woman stood in front of it, a beige coat whipping in the wind, hair the color of polished copper catching the light. Vivian Hale, his wife of 2 years, Noah's stepmother, and the glamorous director of the Summit Hope Foundation. For a moment, Mason couldn't breathe. The perfume he'd smelled earlier. Hers. "Vivian," he said, his voice flat. "What did you do?" She didn't move. Her hands were in her pockets, her face carved from calm. "You're overreacting," she said evenly. "He's fine. He's tied to a pipe in 30-degree weather." Her smile faltered just slightly. "I wanted to teach him a lesson. He went through my files. You have no idea what he's capable of, what you're risking." Atlas barked, stepping between them. The bark cut the air like thunder. Vivian flinched. Mason stood, still holding Noah. "Don't take another step." Vivian's eyes flicked toward her SUV, calculating. For a split second, Mason saw the truth. Fear, not guilt. Something else was behind this, something bigger than discipline or jealousy. "Who's helping you?" he demanded. Her gaze hardened. "You should have stayed out of my work, Mason. You just don't understand what power costs." Atlas growled, hackles up. Vivian took one backward step, boots slipping in the mud. "You'll regret this," she said softly, voice trembling at the edge of control. Sirens rose in the distance, county units closing in fast. The light from her SUV flickered, catching the edge of a silver badge clipped to her purse. Mason recognized it instantly. The Summit Hope Foundation's donor ID, the same logo stamped on every grant check she'd asked him to co-sign. Atlas lunged forward, barking, and Vivian froze. The headlights threw her shadow long across the junk piles. "Don't leave the boy at the dump," Mason said quietly, the words more a plea than an order. For the first time, something cracked in her perfect mask. Her lips trembled, eyes glistening. But then the mask returned. She turned away as the red and blue lights flooded the ridge. Mason held his son tighter. Atlas stood firm beside them, his breath steaming in the cold, his ears pointed toward the incoming sirens. The desert wind howled through the metal and dust, scattering the blue ribbon across the ground. In that sound was a warning. What began as rescue would not end there. Tonight the dog had found the boy. Tomorrow he might have to find the truth. Morning bled into the red spine of the mesas, turning the reed house the color of warm cedar. Frost clung to the porch rail, and a line of boot prints cut from the driveway to the back door. Inside, the air held coffee, pine cleaner, and a faint trace of Dior that did not belong to this place. Rosa Delgado moved through the kitchen with the quiet rhythm of someone who has kept other people standing for a very long time. 55, a widow with careful hands, she set a bowl of oatmeal in front of Noah and pretended not to watch the boy flinch at every sudden noise. Atlas lay long across the kitchen threshold like a gate. His eyes tracked the hallway that ended at Vivian Hale's office. The door was locked. It was always locked. The crack beneath it sent out the clean bite of printer toner and that city perfume that turned the house a few degrees colder. On the living room TV, Vivian smiled from a morning show couch, perfect under studio lights. She spoke about compassion and transparency at Summit Hope. She looked at the camera like she loved the person on the other side. The anchor laughed softly. The Chiron promised a new round of grants for rural families. Rosa muted the set. The quiet changed the room. Without sound, Vivian's smile looked posed, like a painting that did not know it had been hung crooked. Mason came in, uniform half on, radio clipped but silent. He kissed Noah's head, squeezed Rosa's shoulder in thanks, then paused as Atlas rose and padded to the hallway. The dog lowered his head and pulled air under the locked door, muscles stiff the way they got when he scented something that did not match the picture in his mind. "Easy," Mason said, but his voice was far away. Vivian swept in from the garage, coat draped over one arm, phone in the other. Her voice was light, the kind of light you carry into courtrooms and boardrooms. "Good, you are still here. I need a few quick signatures. Donor confidence, nothing more." She set a blue folder on the island. The tabs were color-coded. The sticky flags already marked where to sign. Mason flipped a page. Transfer authorization, internal routing, co-signer Sergeant Mason Reed. "You know I am not accounting. You are integrity," she said, smiling at Rosa like they were all in on this together. "2 initials and a signature. We have a board call in 20 minutes. Noah slid off his chair. The toy recorder he had carried since last night clicked alive in his pocket. He crossed to Atlas and tucked his fingers into the fur at the dog's collar. Atlas leaned into him and watched Vivian move. Rosa rinsed a mug and saw, reflected in the chrome of the faucet, something bright under the passenger seat of Vivian's SUV, visible through the mud-splashed garage door window. A sliver of silver. When she stepped out to toss the compost, Atlas followed, head high. He nosed the SUV's open door and hooked the object out with a paw. A lanyard, silver thread braided tight, the Summit Hope logo on a flat tag. The fabric was frayed, as if it had been torn free. Atlas dropped it at Mason's boots. The dog's ears tipped forward. He gave a single, low sound that was not a growl and not a whine, the sound he made when a track started to form in his head. Vivian did not miss the exchange. She stepped forward too quickly, then forced herself to slow. That must have fallen yesterday. Thank you, Atlas. She reached, but Mason was faster. He turned the tag in his hand. A smear of fine dirt rimmed the edge, not the red soil of their hill, but grey dust, the kind that lives on tire piles and broken plastic. Where did you go after you left the station yesterday? Mason asked. The question landed soft. It did not feel soft. Donor meat, she said. You know this. Name. Anonymous. They like it that way. Rosa and Atlas in the doorway. Noah clutching the toy recorder like a talisman. The muted TV held Vivian's earlier smile. In the kitchen, the real one lost a little polish. Mason put the lanyard on the counter, then bent to the folder again. The clock on the microwave ticked, loud. He initialed one tab, then another. He hesitated at the signature line. The papers smelled faintly of toner, not ink. His name was already typed under co-signer, neat and confident. The neatness bothered him, and he did not yet know why. Vivian angled her body between him and the hallway. You are late, love. He signed. Habit, trust, the twin gods of busy men. Next time I read all of it. Of course, she said, snapping the folder closed before he could see the second stack beneath it, where his name was scanned in perfect blue across 3 identical pages. Atlas stepped between Vivian and the office door. She froze for a beat, then let out a soft laugh that did not reach her eyes. You are very protective today. Noah looked up. He does not like that room. Rosa wiped her hands, then set her towel down. Rooms take the temperature of their owners. She said it gently, but the line hung in the air like a draft. Vivian picked up the folder and her keys. I will be at the foundation until late. Rosa, please do not tidy the office. Sensitive documents. Nothing in this house needs more locks, Rosa said. It needs light. Vivian's smile hardened. Privacy is not secrecy, Ms. Delgado. Sometimes it is. Atlas moved again. The movement was not big, but it held the room. Mason put a hand on the dog's shoulder. Atlas stilled, eyes never leaving Vivian's face. He did not bare his teeth. He did not have to. The control in that body was its own message. Vivian exhaled, slow. Her gaze went briefly to Noah's pocket, where the tiny red light on the toy recorder blinked. Her lashes lowered. When she looked up, the charm was back. I will bring dinner, something special. The garage door rumbled. The SUV backed down the drive. Silence returned, the kind that hums in your teeth. Mason watched the lanyard on the counter. He touched the grey dust and felt grit. Not their hill, not the roads he drove. He picked up his phone. The thought arrived whole. ILPR can tell me if she was near Red Mesa before the call. Before he could dial, Noah tugged his sleeve. Dad. The boy raised the toy recorder. He pressed play. Voices bled through static. Vivian's laugh. Another voice. A man, low and worried. Then Vivian again. No one checks when the paperwork shines. Mason's jaw tightened. Atlas's head rose at the sound, as if the words had a smell. His ears turned toward the locked office. The dog stood and went to the door, then sat, square and still, and waited. Rosa crossed herself without thinking. Instinct knows first, she said. Then proof follows. Mason put his hand on Atlas's collar. The dog's pulse thrummed under his palm, steady and hot. Find me the truth, Mason whispered, not sure if he was speaking to the dog or to the day that had just turned. The house held its breath. Outside, the mesas burned copper under a thin winter sun. Inside, the air smelled of coffee gone, cold and paper warmed by a laser printer. Rosa found the envelopes by accident, buried under a glossy brochure stack on the console table. 2 white flats addressed to different donors. The embossed Summit Hope seal sat proud on each flap. Proud and wrong. The ridge in the S was nicked in the exact same place. The circle of the O was a hair off-center. Identical flaws. Embossers leave cousins, not twins. She did not call for Mason. She called for the boy. Noah padded in, small and quiet. Toy recorder tucked in his hoodie pocket, like a secret he was still deciding to keep. Rosa set the envelopes on the table beneath the window. She angled the blinds until the sun raked low across the paper and lit the seams of the seal. "Take pictures," she said softly. "Straight on and from the side. Get the shadows." He snapped 3. Then 3 more. Atlas rose from where he had been lying and moved to the hallway like he had been assigned there by rank. He lay across the threshold to Vivian's office, front paws extended, chest square, head up. A sentry. When Rosa reached for the doorknob, he flicked his eyes to her hand, then back to the door as if to say, "Not yet. Proof first." Mason stood at the kitchen island with his phone to his ear. He had pulled the lanyard out again. Grey dust rimmed its edge. He turned it between thumb and finger as if it might answer. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Reed," he said. "Plate check and ALPR sweep. Lexus RX, New Mexico tags registered to Vivian Hale. I need hits past 24 hours county-wide." The pause was long enough for the fridge to cycle on and off. Then the voice came back crisp. "Copy, Reed. We have 2 pings. First at 1442, inbound on County 10, Red Mesa access. Second at 1507, outbound, same route. No other hits in city limits." The times lay down like stones. Noah had been missing between 1430 and 1530. Mason's jaw worked, then went still. "Send me the capture frames and GPS coordinates. I'll forward to investigations." He hung up and stared at the lanyard. Atlas lifted his head and watched Mason the way only a working dog can, reading the breath, the shoulders, the line of the eyes. When Mason looked toward the office door, Atlas was already on his feet. He did not open the door. He placed his body in front of it and anchored. "Okay," Mason said. "We do this clean." He drove to the county building with the heater turned too high and Atlas in the back, steady as a rock. Noah had wanted to come. Rosa kept him home, hands planted on the boy's shoulders like guardrails. She would not let the law take his courage for the price of procedure. The investigations floor was cool and spare. Lieutenant Dinah Whitlow met them at the secured door and swiped them in. She was mid-40s, sharp eyes, a voice that could still a locker room without raising a decibel. She had been a patrol officer when Mason was new. He had learned to keep his reports straight because she once handed one back without a word. The silence had felt like a court. "Walk me through," she said. They sat in interview 2. Atlas lay at Mason's feet, his harness off, his head resting on his paws, eyes open. The room hummed with fluorescent light and the soft click of the recorder spinning up. Mason laid out the timeline in clean lines. The anonymous tip, the landfill, the rescue, the SUV, the perfume. He did not touch motive. He did not say the word wife. He said the name Vivian once and never again. Dana did not ask why. She wrote times, places, names. Then she said the thing he knew she would say. "You cannot stay on this. Conflict of interest is not a technicality. It is there to keep the case from dying in court. You move to witness, effective immediately." "I know," Mason said. It cost him to say it. He said it anyway. "Chain it and run it. I'll hand you everything." He reached into the evidence tote he had packed at the kitchen island with the precision of a man taking apart his own rifle. He slid a clear bag across the table. Inside lay the silver lanyard. A second bag with the envelopes Rosa had flagged, each in a sleeve, the seals unbroken. a third with a flash drive holding Noah's photos, and a fourth with the toy recorder itself, battery taped in place, red light dark for now. Dana nodded to the tech at the door. Open a property log, separate item numbers, photograph transfers, witness sign-offs. Atlas watched each bag like it might try to get away. The tech, a young man with careful hands, set the evidence stickers, sealed the zippers, and had Mason initial the seams. Dana signed beneath. She checked the time on the wall clock and read it aloud into the record. The small, boring holiness of due process filled the room. ILPR? She asked. Mason slid his phone across. 2 hits, in and out of Red Mesa inside the window. I requested the frames. We will pull original data from the county feed, Dana said, and traffic cams on County 10 and the landfill gate. We will need Noah to confirm what he saw and heard. Not today. Understood. Dana closed her notebook. We will also track vehicle telematics from the Summit Hope fleet. Many charities lease with tracking for insurance. If her vehicle carries a module, we will know drive time down to the minute. A small twist of wryness at her mouth. Donor confidence cuts both ways. Atlas's ears flicked at the word vehicle. He stood, walked to the door, and sat again, as if asking when the work moved from talk to ground. Dana looked at him. He is a force, she said. He is the line. Mason answered. She studied Mason in a long, unreadable beat. You did right calling it in last night. That will matter. It was Atlas, he said. He found the boy. He held the scene by just standing there. The tech returned with a printout from property. 4 entries, 4 seals, scanner barcodes, initials, times. Dana passed the sheet to her, Mason to review and sign. He signed, and something in his shoulders lowered, like a man setting a heavy pack down where he could still see it. Dana rose. You are off the case, but I will call you when we need you. We will do this by the book. If there is rot, we cut it clean. They stepped into the hall. From behind them, a detective stuck his head out of a cubicle. Lieutenant, he called. ALPR stills just hit. Same Lexus at the gate camera. Also second car in the same window. Grey Tacoma, commercial plates tied to a vendor listed under Summit Hope operations. Name, Dana said. Ruiz Logistics, owner Marco Ruiz. The name meant nothing to Mason. It meant everything to the way the story bent. Not one vehicle, 2, not one choice. A chain. Dana did not look at Mason. She did not have to. Run Ruiz. Cross with Summit Hope vendor payments and sell pings. Now. Mason felt Atlas step closer to his leg, a quiet press of weight like a promise. The father in him wanted to follow the new track until his lungs gave out. The cop in him knew he had just done the bravest part. He had stopped. Outside, the wind came up off the flats and rattled the flags on the courthouse lawn. Mason clipped Atlas's lead and walked him to the truck. The dog jumped in and turned, eyes bright, ears forward, waiting for the next order. Easy, Mason said, hand on the warm skull for a breath longer than usual. From here, we let the truth run. He closed the door. Inside the building, evidence cooled under labels and signatures. In the truck, the dog watched the entrance, still as a stone statue, as if he could hold the whole case in place by will alone. The father stepped back half a pace. The dog stepped forward half a pace. And the day moved. The memory came back in shards of light on the windshield and the smell of hot plastic. Late afternoon, the sky the color of nickel. Vivian drove with one hand, sunglasses on, voice gentle in a way that never reached her eyes. She told Noah they were going to see land for a community center. He hugged his backpack, nodding because that was what boys did when grown-ups made plans. Marco Ruiz rode in the back, shoulders tight, the Summit Hope polo stretched across a chest built from loading docks and long shifts. Operations manager, driver when needed, the man who always made the schedule bend. He watched the road and the rear-view mirror and his own hands. Red Mesa opened like a wound, heaps of scrap, and a wind that never rested. Vivian parked between two mounds of broken pallets and stepped out without a flinch. She spoke softly, almost kind. "A lesson," she said. "Just a moment to teach him and his father not to pry. Tie him gently," she added, like she was asking for a bow on a gift. Marco looked at the boy, then at the rope. His jaw clicked. He crouched and looped the line, hands shaking so badly he had to redo the knot. Noah asked why. Vivian answered with a smile that had no warmth in it. "Because some doors stay closed, sweetheart." The wind rose, carrying the smell of burnt plastic. Marco stood. Vivian said it would be 10 minutes, no harm, that fear could be useful. They walked back to the SUV. Marco turned once. Noah was small against the pipe, eyes bright with trying not to cry. The present snapped back under floodlights. Dana Whitlow's crew worked through the cold, moving with the choreography of people who know how evidence dies when it is rushed. Tripods rose above the pipe. A laser grid skimmed the ground. A tech bagged the rope, gloved hands careful, fibers photographed before they ever touched a sleeve. Boot tracks were cast in plaster, labeled with flag markers. 2 sets, not one, same time span, different weights. One shoe dragged on the outer right toe. Dana wrote it down without looking up. She could feel the case assemble in the air, another structure built from angles and patience. At the checkpoint on County 10, a deputy waved down the white Lexus. Vivian sat behind the wheel in a neat coat and clean hair, and a face trained to be the calmest thing in a storm. She kept her voice low, even when the questions were not soft. She said there had been no danger. She said boys wander. She said people like her do not do what the radio was suggesting. Back at the site, Mason did not answer any of that. He draped an insulated blanket over Noah's shoulders and tucked the edges in tight. He kept his own voice level because his son was watching his face for what to feel. Atlas stood with his chest to the wind and his eyes on Vivian. He did not blink when the strobes washed blue over the piles. His ears pivoted to every tread and zipper and note, but his gaze held. Forensics passed with clipped nods, and he did not move. Dogs in training are taught to ignore their hearts. Dogs who have worked enough nights learn when to use them. A deputy carried the silver lanyard to Dana. She pinched it in the corner of the bag, noted the dust ring, noted the fray. The evidence clerk read the time and the barcode into the recorder. The toy recorder went into another bag, battery still taped, tag signed across the seam. Chain of custody did not care about politics, only about seals and times and hands. A second patrol unit rolled in from the south. The driver called out through the cold. They had pulled a grey Tacoma with commercial plates linked to a Summit Hope vendor account. Ruiz Logistics was on the contract. Not Ruiz, but the paperwork lined up. The driver said the passenger looked sick when he saw the tape line, then sat with his palms open as if to show he had nothing left to hide. Dana's mouth flattened. Not triumph, not surprise. Just the next step. She sent a detective to collect the Tacoma's floor mats and to dust the passenger door handle. She sent another to pull vehicle telematics from the charity's fleet. Insurance trackers could put a truck on a road down to the minute. Donor Confidence had purchased their own map. Mason kept his distance and his oath. He signed a witness log and swallowed the part of him that still wanted to argue with the woman in the Lexus. Vivian glanced across the tape once, eyes finding him and then finding the dog. Her expression flickered. She had always been comfortable with men who spoke in rooms where cameras lived. She had never been comfortable with the animal that did not need words. She called out that it had been a scare only, a mistake blown large. Dana did not answer. She pointed to the pipe, The rope bagged and tagged, the footprints set in plaster, the ALPR times on a clipboard. Evidence speaks. People try. Noah leaned into Mason's side and watched Atlas as if the dog were the only fixed thing in a night that kept shifting. Atlas stepped forward once, just enough to place himself between the boy and the line of cars. The conflict finally showed itself in straight lines. From the dump to the boardroom, from embossed seals to a knot pulled tight by a man who could not look at a child. A simple track, paper thin, but it held. And at the front of it, a German shepherd stood very still, reading the wind for what the truth would do next. By noon the forms were signed, Mason's statement sealed. His badge remained on his chest, but the file slipped from his hands by design. Witness, not lead. He walked out of investigations lighter and heavier at once, like a man who had laid down a pack and kept the road. Outside, the wind came hard off the flats. Vivian broke from the deputy at the checkpoint and angled for her Lexus, keys pinched white in her fist. Atlas moved before Mason spoke. A blur of muscle and discipline. He planted on the hood, claws skidding on steel with a scream of metal. He did not bite. He did not bark. He made the car belong to him. Vivian stumbled back, hands up, face shocked naked for the first time. Atlas dropped to the gravel between her and the door, chest squared, tail low, eyes locked. She shifted right. He flowed with her, a living barricade. The only sound was his breath and the far-off click of the camera on a deputy's vest. Mason reached him then, palm down. Atlas, hold. The shepherd held. He moved only his head. The left ear showed a fresh, thin slice along the edge, where claw had skipped, where steel had caught. Red beaded, bright against tan fur. Atlas didn't shake it. He knew the difference between pain and problem. Back away from the vehicle, Dana called, voice flat as a level. You're not driving anywhere. Vivian steadied. Composure returned in layers. This is theatre, she said. He was never in danger. No one answered. You do not argue with a man's child still wearing a blanket in daylight. They split the scene. Vivian to processing, Marco Ruiz to a grey room with a scuffed table and a camera that blinked without sympathy. The air smelled like drywall and old coffee. He sat hunched, big hands quiet in his lap, Summit Hope polo traded for county scrubs. Across from him, a detective pressed the red button and recited the date. Marco stared at the table. Then he slid his phone from a property bag, the screen still greasy with old prints. On it, a picture. A narrow-shouldered girl in a birthday crown, cheeks full of cake, brown eyes fierce with joy. He touched the glass with one blunt finger, then set it face down. The sound it made was small, the decision it marked was not. Start where it turns criminal, the detective said. He swallowed. Invoices through Phoenix, he said, voice hoarse. Vendors that aren't real. Ruiz Logistics, yes, but also shells. A sign shop in Winslow that printed seals for cash. A P.O. box we used as a pass-through. Programs that closed kept getting paid. Morning Light, Rural Gardens. They were dead on paper. We kept them alive for the balance sheets. Who signed? Her, digitally. Mine, when she needed a body. And the cop's name. She scanned his signature. Put it on 3 checks at once. He lifted his eyes. They look good, but they're too good. No pen gouge, no ink skip. Same pixel pattern on every stroke. What did you get out of it? He almost laughed. It came out like a cough. Wages, threats. She found my deferred charge from when I was 20. Said she'd make it current in the papers. Said donors don't forgive records. He swallowed again. Said she'd call CPS on me if I didn't move money when she said. Silence sat down at the table with them. Yesterday? The detective asked. At Red Mesa. Marco blinked hard. She called it a lesson. 10 minutes to scare the boy. She said the father would come faster scared. I tied him because I've been tying knots since I was 10, because my hands know how to do what they're told. I tied him because I was a coward. He reached for the phone and flipped it again. The girl grinned up at him through frosting. His mouth trembled. My kid thinks I'm the good one, he said, voice breaking. I can't have her learn I'm not from a headline. Then give us names. The detective said softly. Vendors, accounts, the man at the print shop. Tony Vargas, he said at once. Outside Winslow by the feed store. He prints rabbit show posters and fake seals on the side. Summit Hope leased fleet trucks with trackers. The Lexus, too. She doesn't know insurance logs time down to the minute. The detective wrote without looking up. Documents? In her office, bottom left drawer. She keeps the real ledger in plain sight. The lies live under the printer in a box labeled Holiday Decor. The camera blinked. The clock ticked. Somewhere down the hall a door slammed and echoed like a gunshot, and Marco flinched even though he knew better. Why now? The detective asked. Why talk? He touched the picture again. The words came out steady. Because fear made me smaller than my daughter needs me to be, because that boy was shaking in a blanket and the dog looked through me like a mirror. Because I don't want to be the reason a good man's name is dirty ink on a fake check. He lowered his head and kept talking until there was nothing left to say. Vendor by vendor, account by account, times, plates, people who smiled at galas and moved wires before midnight. He offered his own part freely and did not ask what it would buy him. His sacrifice was not grand. It was simple. He put his record back on the table and called it his. Across the building, Mason dabbed antiseptic on Atlas's ear with the same care he once used to bandage Noah's scraped knees. The dog leaned into him, heavy and trusting, letting the sting come and go. You did your job, Mason said. Better than the rest of us. Atlas closed his eyes, not from pain, but from the comfort of a hand that knew exactly where to rest. Dinah stepped in. Her face said tired. Her eyes said forward. Ruiz is talking, she said. Invoices, ghost vendors. Your name, scanned. He gave us a print shop in Winslow and a drawer labeled Holiday Decor. Mason nodded. He did not smile. Then run it. We are, she said. You did the right thing stepping out. He looked at the bandage blooming white against Atlas's ear. He kept her from leaving. He said quietly. Cost him a line of skin. Worth it. Dana followed his gaze. Sell it to a jury just like that, she said. A good dog held the line. Outside the wind rose again, and the flags on the courthouse lawn snapped like sails. In one room, a father stayed on the witness side of the table. In another, a man chose truth over a quieter life. And in the space between them, a shepherd lay with one ear taped and both eyes open, guarding the thin place where fear ends and courage begins. By morning the conference room felt like winter, bright, hard, unforgiving. Naomi Park laid the ledger across the table the way a medic unfolds a map before a triage. Late 30s, wire-frame glasses, hair pulled tight. She spoke without theatre and left silence where certainty should live. These signatures repeat, she said. Exact pixel geometry, no pen impressions, no pressure valleys, every loop identical, stroke for stroke. She slid magnified printouts across to Dana. The blue curve of Mason's name sat copied on 3 checks and 2 grant approvals. Under the loop, the edges were too clean. Scanned, Naomi said. Placed, not signed. She turned to the flowchart taped the length of the wall. Lines ran from Summit Hope to 3 banks, then out into 4 vendor boxes no one could find on a state registry. Money crossed into Arizona, up to Colorado, back into New Mexico. Small amounts, just under review thresholds, stitched together like a quilt that only looks random. Wire fraud, Naomi said. Charity fraud. Possible laundering. We have interstate movement and false documentation. The vendors tie to a UPS store box and a logistics company that never reported this revenue. We also have the leased fleet tracker data. The Lexus and the Tacoma. Times align. Dinah nodded once and picked up a pen. Affidavit now. They wrote the warrant in simple language. Naomi attached exhibits, ALPR stills, telematics timestamps, vendor searches, scans of seals with the same misregistered ridge. At the back, she clipped a transcript pulled from a plastic blue toy. A tech rolled in a cart with headphones and a small recorder nested like a jewel in foam. He pressed play. They heard the shush of clothing, the hum of a vent, and Vivian's voice clear and patient in a house that no longer felt like home. No one checks when the paperwork shines, she said. The world rewards boldness. The line sat in the air, a fuse burning in quiet. They filed to the judge's chambers with the morning still cold on their coats. Judge Lorena Espinosa read in silence. She tapped the page once with a short nail. Clean chain. Sufficient probable cause, she said. Warrants granted. Search, seize, freeze. Paper moved fast when the story held. Deputies split into teams before noon. The first went to the Sandstone Office Park, where Summit Hope rented glass and light. The second to the Winslow print shop behind the feed store. The third to the Hale house on the hill, where Rosa had set a pot of stew on low and put Noah at the table with math he could manage and a dog within reach. Atlas paced the threshold when the knock came. He didn't bark. He watched. His ears tipped forward when Dana stepped in with the order, and he moved aside like he understood law. Rosa will be careful, Dana said. Rosa nodded and wiped her hands. Bottom drawer, she said. Left side, and a box beneath the printer that says Holiday Decor. In the office, the smell of toner and perfume stayed, but the perfection was over. Evidence gloves lifted files in order. The top ledger was immaculate. The box beneath was not. Inside, labeled envelopes and a stack of pre-printed checks. The seals matched Naomi's misprints. The checks carried the scan of a signature they had already proved wasn't Mason's hand. Bag it, Dana said. At Summit Hope headquarters, a receptionist tried to smile through a tremor. The server tower hummed in a closet no one but IT was supposed to open. The warrant opened it. Drives came out and went into anti-static sleeves. Donor lists, vendor logs, a spreadsheet titled Morning Light Phase 3, months after the press release had declared it closed. In Winslow, the print shop bell jingled. The man behind the counter smelled of solvent and coffee gone old. Tony Vargas? The detective asked. He lifted his palms. He looked more tired than scared. I printed what she brought me, he said. Cash, same seal every time. I thought it was for gala napkins. You printed embossers, the detective said. Vargas looked at the cutter on the table. I printed money for her. Reputation, he said finally. You can take the press. They did. At the detention center, Vivian watched the world shift from a small table, a paper cup of water untouched. When the financial charges were read through the glass, she tried to keep her face set. The words were not dramatic. They were precise. Wire fraud, charity fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The kidnapping counts remained, joined now by crimes that came with ledger pages and bank seals and less room to argue. You don't understand the game, she said, voice thin but level. Everyone glazes numbers, everyone rounds up. Dana's gaze did not move. Everyone doesn't tie a child to a pipe, she said, and everyone doesn't forge the name of a cop. Back at the house, Noah put his pencil down and watched Atlas shadow the agents carrying boxes from the office. The dog sniffed each passing bag, a quick flick of approval, then returned to his post at the boy's knee. His ear wore a white strip of tape now. It made him look somehow more official. Naomi stood in the doorway and looked at the family the case had threatened to break. "We'll freeze the accounts today," she said quietly to Mason. "No more money moves without court approval." "What happens to Summit Hope?" he asked. "It becomes what it pretended to be, or it dies clean," she said. "Either beats what it was." He nodded and rubbed Atlas's ribs with a grateful hand. "He kept the line when I couldn't." Naomi looked at the shepherd. "He read what the rest of us only measured," she said. And that was how power ended for Vivian Hale. Not with sirens, not with speeches. With forms filled, seals stamped, boxes carried out under a dog's watchful eyes. A door closed somewhere in the building, and the sound was small. The cold that followed it was not. The county courthouse smelled like paper and old wood polish. Morning light struck the seal above the bench as Judge Evelyn Carr took her seat and read without flourish. Risk of flight, pattern of deception, danger to a child. Bail denied. Vivian Hale would remain in custody until trial. The words made no sound beyond the clerk's pen, but their weight settled across the room like a door closing. Marco Ruiz stood 2 tables away, shoulders square in a borrowed blazer that did not quite fit. When the judge asked if he understood the terms of his cooperation agreement, he said yes, and his voice did not shake. He had already signed the amended statement, page after page in clean block letters. He had already led Dana's team to the cinder-block shop outside Winslow, where a hot foil press sat warm under a tarp. Now he handed over a folder of printouts and a thumb drive pulled from an email cache he had never deleted. Vendor approvals, wire instructions, calendar invites for late-night stream meetings where budgets were massaged to fit a story. He did not ask what this would do to his case. He asked that the detectives pronounce his daughter's name correctly when they wrote their reports. After the hearing, the hallway filled with winter coats and quiet speculation. Dana Whitlow caught Mason by the stairs, her badge clipped to the pocket of a black suit that had seen too many long days. "You can step off now," she said. "This is moving without you. You did your part." Mason looked past her to the bulletin board where the county posted resource flyers, food banks, and rental help, all the places charities were supposed to reach before the money went sideways. "My name was on her checks," he said. "Even as a scan, it was there. I am not taking a seat at her old table, but I am not walking away either." Dinah studied him. "So what do you want?" "Freeze what is left," he said. "Put it under a temporary trust. Build a new charter with outside eyes. No galas, no glossy. If it lives again, it lives small and honest. If it dies clean." That afternoon, Judge Carr signed the trust order. Naomi Park drafted the framework with the precision she used on her flowcharts. 3 trustees with no prior ties to Summit Hope. Quarterly public reports, donor notifications written in plain language. Mason declined every title they offered. He accepted a role no one could frame on a wall. Advisor, unpaid, available, responsible for nothing, and accountable for everything he said in rooms where decisions were made. At the elementary school on Sandstone Mesa, the counselor unlocked a small storage closet and brought out 2 worn mats and a basket of soft brushes. The sign on her door read, "Quiet Room," but the kids called it the breathing room. Noah stood in the doorway with his backpack crooked on one shoulder. Atlas sat beside him, tail settled, eyes kind. "We will try short sessions first," the counselor said. 3 minutes. No talking unless they want to. The dog stays where he can see the door. Atlas chose his spot without being told, between the kids and the exit, a place that said safe in a language older than counseling. The first boy to come in would not look at anyone. He sat and picked at a loose thread on his sleeve, shoulders up around his ears. Atlas lowered his head to the boy's knee and waited. The boy's fingers stopped moving. He breathed. He touched the fur like it might break, then leaned his forehead against the dog's shoulder and let one small sound out, the kind you only make when someone strong is listening. Word traveled faster than flyers. Teachers began scheduling 5-minute blocks. Kids who had seen too much in a year selected a brush and gave themselves permission to be gentle. Atlas learned each of them by scent. He learned which ones needed weight across their feet and which ones needed space. He took the room's noise into his chest and gave back silence that felt anchored. On a grey Thursday, Rosa Delgado brought a tray of empanadas to the community center, where the trustees met for the first time at a folding table with a chipped edge. She set the food down, kissed Noah's hair, and gave Mason a look that said she still kept a house standing when everything else leaned. Naomi arrived with binders and a thermos, Dana with a laptop, and the posture of someone who had promised herself she would not get cynical today. "We keep this simple," Naomi said. "First audit, then action. We will rebuild what we can verify. Everything else goes away." Mason nodded. "If this place ever prints a brochure, it will be a single page with a phone number." Dino almost smiled. "I can live with that." News cameras parked outside when the detention order became public, but no one went to the microphone. No victory speeches. In the evening, Mason drove home up the switchbacks, the light going copper on the mesa. At a stop sign, he looked over at Atlas, who had his nose just off the crack of the window, reading whatever the air knew. "You are working extra," he said. The dog blinked, as if to say, "This is the job." At bedtime, Noah tucked a brush under his pillow like a talisman. "Do you think she will ever say sorry?" he asked in the dark. "Maybe," Mason said. "Maybe not. Either way, the court will do its part. We will do ours. That is how people heal without forgetting." Atlas took his spot in the doorway, head on paws, ears forward, the old instinct meeting a new assignment. Outside, Sandstone was quiet. Inside, for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt earned. The school counselor's office was painted the color of river stones. A tabletop fountain whispered in the corner, a sound that did not demand anything from anyone. Noah sat cross-legged on a woven rug with a foam ball in his hands. The counselor, Ms. Beck, counted softly with him. In for 3. Hold for 3. Out for 3. They did it again until the count became muscle memory, not math. When his eyes drifted to the window, Atlas lifted his head and let one ear tip toward the boy's breath, a small metronome that kept time with a chest trying to relearn calm. "You do not have to win the whole day," Ms. Beck said. "You only have to win this minute, then the next." Noah nodded. On the third round, he pressed the ball against Atlas's shoulder and the dog leaned forward, adding gentle weight, the way he had been trained for deep pressure on small bodies. Ms. Beck made a note without looking away. The room was simple, and the work was not, but the boy left with his shoulders a fraction lower, and the world outside the door a fraction less sharp. In the backyard, the dirt smelled clean after a short noon shower, rare and kind. Rosa knelt at a narrow bed she had turned with her hands and a small spade. She had ordered seed packets from a nursery that understood this hard country, plants that knew how to drink little and give color anyway. "Desert lupine," she said, showing Noah the photograph on the front. "Blue and violet, stubborn as truth. They come back even after heat." They worked together, small fingers and worn ones digging shallow lines, dropping seeds, tucking them in. Rosa hummed as she moved, a tune her mother had hummed in a kitchen far from Sandstone. When Noah asked what the song meant, she translated a piece of it. "The ground remembers, even when we forget to be brave." He pressed a palm flat to the soil. "Then I want this ground to remember we tried." Inside, the house lost its chill. The place that once carried quiet with a sharp edge now held a different kind, the kind that comes after chores and soup. the living room filled with the soft scrape of books sliding from shelves and the rustle of a sleeping dog at dusk. Sometimes the quiet broke on purpose. Laughter in two notes, a boy's and an older woman's, when Atlas sneezed at the dust cloud he had made by climbing under the sofa for a missing marble. On Saturdays, Mason drove Atlas to the community center and signed him in for therapy refresher sessions. They ran agility in slow patterns, not for speed but for focus, over a low bar, through a tunnel, onto a pause box where Atlas froze like a statue until his handler said free. Between drills, the trainer checked the dog's ear. The thin cut had healed to a fine line, a white thread against tan. The trainer smiled. A scar is a story that ends with stayed. By the end of the month, Atlas had a new weekend assignment. The library director had called the precinct to ask about canines who could sit for ridding buddies. The program was simple. Children who carried fear of pages brought a book and a blanket. The dog lay down and made no corrections. Atlas learned the geography of the children's reading room in one slow loop. The low shelves, the rug that looked like a map of a town, the spot near the window where light pooled warm. He wore a narrow collar on library days, a small metal badge that read, Atlas, Loyalty Beyond Duty. Kids reached for it with careful fingers, said the words out loud, then opened their books. A girl with a stutter read about trains, letting the rhythm of wheels lift her through hard consonants. A boy whose father had moved away traced his finger under a story about a lighthouse, stopping to rest when his throat tightened. Atlas kept his head on his paws and did not blink. More than one child left his side with a book tucked to the chest and the feeling that maybe pages were not the enemy. There were setbacks. One night Noah woke with the voice of the landfill in his ears, the hiss of plastic lifting in a cold wind. He sat up fast, breathing too shallow, counting too quick. Atlas was already there. He did not lick. He did not crowd. He pressed his weight across the boy's shins and stayed until the count slowed to a shape that could hold sleep again. From the hall, Mason watched and did not interrupt. He knew the sound a body makes when it is learning to be safe. A small twist found them on a Tuesday in the mailbox at the bottom of the hill. A plain envelope, no return address, with a child's drawing inside. A dog, a boy, a tall man, stick figures, but certain. Underneath, in careful block letters, the name Lila, Marco's daughter. On the back, Rosa found a note in her own language, written by a parent who had chosen to tell the truth in a room with a camera. Thank you for making my father brave. Noah pinned the picture to the kitchen corkboard with a magnet shaped like a star. When he asked if they could write back, Mason said yes, and they did, one short line at a time, letting kindness keep a promise the court could not. At dinner, Rosa set down beans and rice and a pan of roasted squash, food that fills the corners of a day without fuss. They ate at the small table by the window, where the mountains cut a dark line across a fading sky. Mason reached for Noah's plate reflexively when Juice ran and stopped himself. You have it. The boy caught the motion and grinned. That is my job. Later, Mason took a folder from the counter and spread pages out. Draft language for the new trust. Spending caps that made sense in human terms, not gala terms. Quarterly audits open to the public. He read the clauses out loud and listened for the places where pride could hide. Atlas lifted his head at the sound of his voice, then went back to sleep. Chores became a kind of liturgy. Check the locks, water the garden, set out a second towel for paw prints by the back door, pack a brush in Noah's backpack for the breathing room. The life that came back did not announce itself with symbols. It arrived in routines that turned fear into work and work into calm. On Sunday morning, they walked a trail behind the house where the mesa falls away into a wash cut by flash flood years ago. The air was clean and high. Noah carried a small pouch of treats, and gave one when Atlas' heel turned without a cue. At the overlook, the boy leaned against Mason's side. "Do you think it will ever feel like it did before?" he asked. Mason looked over the red rock and the low junipers, at the town laid out small and stubborn below. "I think it will feel like this," he said. "Not the same. Not worse, just ours." Noah nodded. Atlas pushed his head under the boy's hand as if to say, "Count this breath, then the next." And they did, while the wind moved over the desert like a hand smoothing a wrinkled sheet, quiet, patient, working its way across the day. They opened the doors on a cool morning that smelled like cut lumber and coffee. No podium, no step and repeat. The old Summit Hope sign had been taken down the week before, holes patched, paint rolled fresh. In its place hung a cedar board with a new emblem burned into the grain. A child's hand beside a dog's paw. Blue letters read, "Summit Hope Foundation." People came without press badges. A carpenter with dust on his sleeves carried a level under one arm. A school nurse brought a first aid kit and stayed to arrange books in the corner. 2 teachers unpacked boxes of crayons and a tub of foam dice. A veteran in a worn denim jacket set a bag of dog food by the storage closet and shook Mason's hand like he was closing a circle he had been walking for years. Naomi Park pinned the first quarterly report to a corkboard by the front desk. 1 page, numbers you could follow. A jar below it held index cards, questions, needs, offers. That was the marketing plan. Rosa moved through the lobby with paper cups of agua fresca and a plate of empanadas. She tucked napkins into the hands of people who had forgotten they were hungry. When she passed Noah, she rested her palm on his shoulder, then kept going. A steady current that made the house feel like a home. Atlas watched from the hall at first, reading the room with the patience of a sentry. He had bathed the night before, and his coat shone. He wore the narrow collar with the small badge, the one that said, "Loyalty beyond duty." Children leaned in and then paused, asking with their eyes. Mason nodded. Atlas lowered his head and accepted the touch, as if he knew each hand carried a different kind of fear. The ribbon was not silk. It was a strip of blue fabric cut from a thrift store curtain and ironed flat. Noah stood with a pair of child-safe scissors, hands steady after one deep breath. When he lifted his chin, the crowd fell quiet without anyone asking. "For everyone who got lost and for the animals who knew how to wait," he said. "We are home now." The scissors clicked and Atlas barked once, a clean sound that felt like applause. There was a small act of mercy baked into the day. Naomi had found 3 donor plaques that could not survive the new charter. Names linked to the old lie. They brought them out quietly and set them on a workbench by the yard. The carpenter measured a blank board while everyone else looked anywhere but at the past. Noah stepped forward with a sanding block and worked beside the man until the wood felt honest under his palm. When they hung the new plaque over the main door, the letters were simple and dark. Transparency is kindness that knows how to read. A quiet twist walked in, wearing a collared shirt and a cap pulled low. Tony Vargas from Winslow carried a cardboard tube under his arm. He looked like a man trying to figure out what to do with his hands. He set the tube on the front desk and nodded to Naomi. "Pro bono," he said. "Flyers, intake forms, new letterheads. I will print what you need and sign my full name at the bottom of every invoice." He did not apologize in speeches. He stood beside the corkboard for a long minute, and then left, lighter by the weight of 3 words he had said right. Marco Ruiz arrived at noon with a tool belt and a paper from the court that said community service in fine print. He had asked permission to serve it here. Dana signed off with one line. Under supervision. He built benches out back by the raised beds where the blue lupine had begun to push through, small green spokes against the red dirt. He kept his phone on the table with a drawing of a dog and 3 stick figures under a magnet shaped like a star. When a screw stripped, he laughed under his breath and started the whole over. "You can do things right the second time," he said to no one in particular. Inside, the first intake felt like an experiment that might hold. A young mother sat across from a volunteer and named the bills that frightened her. She spoke slowly, pausing when the shame got loud. The volunteer wrote down amounts and dates and 3 phone numbers for agencies that would actually answer. Atlas lay beside the chair with his paws just touching the woman's shoe, a point of contact that said, "You are not floating." The woman reached down and stroked his fur once, then looked up with a face that had changed by 1 degree. In the afternoon sun, Mason walked the perimeter with a screwdriver and a pocketful of screws, tightening what was loose. He had refused a title and still found a job that mattered. He checked the gate latch, the door closes, the simple things that keep a space from drifting open at the wrong time. Dana came by in plain clothes and leaned on the rail. "You built a place where the exit signs work," she said. "That is rarer than you think." He shrugged. Good doors keep people honest. They dedicated a bench beneath a pinyon pine that smelled of pitch and warm shade. The veteran in the denim jacket set a small brass plate onto it while Noah held the screws. The engraving read, "For the ones who waited, and for the ones who learned how." Rosa sat there for a minute, eyes closed, lips moving in a prayer that was less a request than a thank you. Toward evening, the library cart rolled in with a stack of picture books and a chapter book about a lighthouse. The director smiled at Atlas and pointed to the corner with the map rug. He settled into his place, and the children found theirs. One boy in a hoodie started to read, stumbled, and then smoothed the page with both hands. Atlas did not move, except for the slow press of his breath against the floor. The boy kept going. When he finished the chapter, he leaned down and whispered something into Atlas's ear that no one else heard, then smiled like a door had opened inside his chest. When the last light fell flat across the courtyard, Mason switched off the lobby lamps and stood for a moment in the doorway. The mountains had gone purple. The new sign threw a soft glow onto the ground where the old holes had been patched. He looked down at Atlas, who watched the dark without alarm. "We will keep it small," Mason said. "We will keep it clean." Atlas flicked an ear as if he agreed. Behind them, Summit Hope Foundation held its first quiet night. No cameras, no promises bigger than the rooms could hold. Only a boy who had found his breath, a dog who had become a wall and a bridge, and a place with a name that asked people to walk in and tell the truth. A year later, the courtyard at Summit Hope Foundation lay open to high desert sun. Cotton flags lifted and fell on a soft wind. The wood statue of a shepherd stood at the porch, carved from a pinyon trunk. The artist had left the grain visible. Along the chest, a suggestion of breath caught mid-watch. Atlas lay a few steps away on the cool shade of the stoop. He was still broad at the shoulder, still sure in the way of dogs who have done hard work, but his muzzle carried a dusting of white. Families drifted in and out with paper cups of lemonade. A few kids clutched paper crowns the library had made for Reading buddies. The new sign cast a blue ring on the concrete. Summit Hope Foundation. A hand and a paw. A boy wearing a tee with a faded rocket looked up at the statue, then at the real dog stretched on the stoop. He tugged at Mason's sleeve and asked it the way children ask when they want the truth more than a story. "Is that the dog from the story?" Mason's smile was small and honest. He looked at Atlas, then back to the boy. He did not bark for food. He barked for the truth. The boy reached toward the nameplate on Atlas's collar and read the words under his breath. "Loyalty beyond duty." Atlas blinked slow, a calm acknowledgement. The sound of a camera click came from a mother across the walk. She did not post it. She kept it for herself. Mason stood and walked the edge of the yard, a circuit he had learned by heart. The memorial bench under the pine carried a new ring of polish from hands that sat there to think. The plaque over the door caught sun that had moved one careful inch since morning. Transparency is kindness that knows how to read. Noah arranged paperback books on the map rug. He placed the lighthouse story at the top of the stack without comment. Rosa set empanadas on a paper plate and told 2 teenagers to share, then smiled when they did without argument. Dana stepped through the gate in weekend clothes with a cup of black coffee. She leaned on the rail. "You ever think you would see this day?" she asked. "Not like this," Mason said. He was not a man for speeches. He checked the latch on the gate. He looked at the screws on the hinge. Good doors keep people honest. A small twist found them as the noon wind shifted. From the highway side of the chain link came a thin cry. Atlas was up before anyone else turned. Not a leap, not a rush. He moved like a compass needle finding north. Mason followed with a hand raised to hold the gate open. On the gravel strip behind the center, a toddler had slipped the grip of a distracted uncle and wandered toward the road where light pooled and cars hummed. Atlas stepped in front of the child and stopped, chest broad, head low. The boy pressed both hands into the dog's coat as if Atlas were a wall built for him alone. Mason lifted the child and handed him back to the uncle, whose face had gone the color of paper. No lecture. Just 2 words. Eyes up. The man nodded hard and held his nephew close. The center returned to its pulse. The moment was small, but it pinned the day to its name. Still guarding. Naomi taped the new audit to the corkboard. 1 page. Columns you could follow with a finger. A donor list no longer needed plaques. A jar of index cards filled with questions and offers, and a note from a woman who had found the rent money she had been sure would not appear. Marco arrived with his daughter and a satchel of tools. He sanded a bench slat and showed the girl how to run her palm along the grain to feel where honesty lives. Tony sent over 2 boxes of printed forms with his full name on every invoice. He stood in the doorway for a while, then drifted off down the sidewalk, shoulders easier than when he came. A letter had come that morning, no return address. The clerk handed it to Mason with the mail key. Inside was a drawing on lined paper, careful pencil strokes of a dog lying in shade. The signature at the bottom carried a name they all knew too well. Vivian. Along the margin she had written 8 words. "Fear does not excuse what I did. I am sorry." Mason read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope. He did not hang it on the wall. He placed it in a manila folder labeled Records and slid it into a drawer. Let the past be documented and the future be lived. At 2 o'clock, the reading buddies' hour began. Atlas took his place on the rug. Children settled like birds around him. One boy, new to the group, held a book upside down until Noah flipped it and gave a small nod that did not sting. The boy started slow, mouth heavy on certain letters, then felt the weight of his own voice grow light. He read about a town by the sea and a light that stayed on through storms. When he reached the last page, he pressed his forehead to Atlas's shoulder for 1 second and breathed out like he had been holding air for a year. Mason's phone buzzed on silent. A text from the school counselor. Noah no longer counted every echo in the night. He had started a small club called 3 Breaths by the water fountain. On the corkboard in the hallway at school, a piece of paper with names in pencil grew by 1 each week. Sometimes the work of healing is just good habits given a name. In the late afternoon, a group of elders from the neighborhood sat under the pine and told stories of the old sandstone, when trains still hissed at the edge of town and the diner served pie without asking if you wanted it warmed. They watched Atlas as if he were a sermon. Rosa brought coffee in paper cups and listened for a while, hands still. She had learned that sitting can be a job too. The ceremony was short. No speeches. Mason called for 1 minute of quiet. People set down cups and phones. The quiet was not absence, it was respect. Then Noah stepped to the small stake by the path and pulled away a canvas cloth with both hands. A cedar plank revealed its message in simple black letters. Do not leave the boy at the dump. The line was not a headline, it was a promise. Atlas's ear flicked as if he understood the contract under the words. Mason looked out across the yard at people he knew and people he did not. He saw a veteran whose hands shook less when they held a leash. He saw a mother who had stopped apologizing for needing help. He saw a girl who had chosen to draw in the sun rather than hide in the corner. He saw his son walking with a wooden stake and a spool of twine to tie up a young plant that needed a guide. None of it was dramatic. All of it mattered. He crouched beside Atlas and ran one hand along the dog's ribs. You did good, partner. Atlas pressed his weight into Mason's leg, then settled at the top step again. The light changed. The statue's shadow stretched across the porch. The camera of any eye would have found the image on its own. The real dog, the carved dog, the line of a boy and a man, the blue words on the sign, the desert beyond holding the heat of a long day. A little boy, not Noah, the one with the rocket tee, looked up from the map rug and pointed toward the statue. Is that the dog from the story? Mason did not look away from Atlas when he answered. He did not bark for food. He barked for the truth. The lens inside your head can pull back now. It can ride the light from the porch to the hard edge of the mesa and out over the old landfill where the wind moves plastic like birds that forgot how to land. It can settle on the small metal marker set into a stone by the fence line, letters stamped with a hand press. Do not leave the boy at the dump. If you have walked with us this far, you already know the point. Justice is not thunder. It is paperwork done right and a gate that latches. Healing is not a speech. It is a dog who shows up on Saturdays so children can read out loud without fear. Mercy is the space between what was done to you and what you do next. If this story moved you, tell someone who needs proof that loyal hearts still change outcomes. Share it. Subscribe to the German Shepherd channel so more people meet dogs like Atlas and the humans they steady. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Tell us the name of the dog that stood guard over your life. What is your story with a loyal pet?